I'm Katrina Szish in for Greta Van Susteren, and tonight Newsmax hosts a debate for the South Carolina Republican Senate runoff. Greta is there moderating, and she joins us in a moment for a preview of the big event. It's also primary day in Alaska, Florida, and Wyoming, and a special election in California to replace former Congressman Eric Swalwell. In Florida, socialists, they're on the ballot in Democratic races. Candidate for governor, Republican Byron Donalds, had this to say about socialism.
When it comes to the DSA, their value system just does not conform with Americanism and Western civilization. They want to turn our federal government into a European parliamentary system. Why would we follow Europe? We are the exceptional nation on the face of this planet. It's been proven consistently over the last 250 years.
We'll have a full preview of the Florida races. In Alaska, there is a primary for U.S. Senate, and the seat is currently held by Republican Senator Dan Sullivan. But if you're an Alaska voter, be sure to look very closely at that ballot, and that's because there are two men named Dan Sullivan running. But first, tonight at 7 Eastern, Newsmax hosts the South Carolina Republican Senate runoff debate. Senator Darlene Graham faces off against Congressman Ralph Norman, and that runoff is set for a week from today. Our very own Greta Van Susteren is moderating that debate tonight, and she joins me now from the debate site in Newberry, South Carolina. Greta, I bet people are pretty excited for this. I know we've been excited all day.
Well, it is very exciting, especially since, for a lot of reasons. Of course, there's the legacy of former Senator Lindsey Graham, which we all knew because he'd been a senator for so long. But also think about this, is that the Senate is so close in numbers. And while this is likely to be a Republican seat in November, because it's a very Republican state, nonetheless, is who is going to be the Republican who's going to represent this state. You've got the legacy of Senator Lindsey Graham and his sister. And, of course, people like his sister, but they don't know a whole lot about her. And then you have a 6-term or 5-term congressman who's running against her. But then there's the question is, do people really want experience? Or do they find that experience hasn't been able to get anything done in Washington because we've had basically a logjam for the last 10 or 15 years in Washington? So, this is a chance for both candidates, and especially Senator Darlene Graham, to introduce herself to the voters, not just in South Carolina, but across the nation, because she's an unknown entity. But being unknown doesn't necessarily mean that she wouldn't be an effective senator, but also the fact that, Congressman Ralph Norman, he has been very, very much involved in politics in this state for a long time and around the nation. So this is an exciting race. It's going to be a close race, I think, ultimately, or who knows, in the fall. But President Trump has endorsed Senator Darlene Graham. And then you've got former Governor Nikki Haley, endorsing Ralph Norman. And, of course, Ralph Norman endorsed Governor Nikki Haley when she ran against the candidate Donald Trump in 2016. So there's a lot of sort of personal dynamics going on behind the scenes as well. But we expect it to be an exciting debate, and that these two candidates do have different views, so they're not going to be repeating what the other one says. They're slightly different on a lot of issues. So this is going to be an exciting night for Newsmax. For me, I get to do the debate, or at least moderate it, as well as the voters in this state. And, of course, people around the nation can see who might be the likely U.S. Senator representing South Carolina come November and being sworn in January.
Greta, super exciting stuff. Now, I have to ask you, in terms of what goes into bringing a debate together for you, who will be moderating, do you speak to the candidates in advance? How do you decide which questions you're going to ask, or do they sometimes change in the moment? Just a little behind the scenes for us.
Well, I had to race to come do this with you, Katrina, because we're busy working with the other two who would be, there are other two people who will be asking questions as well, as because we're coordinating right on cards. We're dividing them into different categories: foreign policy, immigration, economy, local economy, Israel. And so we're trying to hone the issues of what we think are important both to the nation, because this will be a vote that affects the entire nation. Ultimately, one senator can make a difference, as well as issues that are particularly important to people here in South Carolina. So we're filtering through and passing cards back and forth to each other, trying to figure out how best to organize it. But of course, there are some issues, like we don't know how many questions do we need, how long will it take. So how much time should we spend on any particular topic? So we're trying to decide how best to bring out all the important issues, but also to give both candidates a fair chance to speak to their voters, because that's the most important thing. If at the end of the night people say, well, that was a fair debate, I'll be very pleased. And of course, if the voters say at the end of the night, I got to learn a little bit more about both candidates, so now I can make my choice, that's also great. So we're still working. As soon as I finish with you, I'm running back to the room and to finish going over questions, trying to figure out what's the best way to proceed.
All right. Well, Greta, we appreciate your making a cameo on your very own show. I appreciate you taking the time out from a very busy day and night. Something tells me this is going to be a fantastic debate. Can't wait to watch it. Thanks, Greta. And again, you can watch the debate tonight beginning at 7 Eastern right here on Newsmax. Joining me now, Beth Martin. She's the chairwoman of the Tea Party Patriots Action. David Carlucci, former Democratic New York State Senator. Welcome to both of you. A lot going on today here. I know I've spoken to both of you multiple times over the past week, but let's get into South Carolina first and foremost. Jenny, as Greta pointed out, President Trump has backed Senator Darlene Graham. Is that enough, however, to get her through to win the special election, considering she just became a senator weeks ago?
Well, I think it's going to give her a lot of votes, and because President Trump's endorsement really does carry a lot of value. I also think that voters don't really know who she is yet, other than the fact that she is Senator Graham's sister. And so they want to know more about her. I think that's why the debate tonight is going to be very important. If she does well and hits it out of the park, that endorsement from President Trump will probably be enough to get her over the finish line. If, however, she holds her own and the current Congressman Ralph Norman holds his own as well and shows what he knows and how he will advocate and fight for President Trump's values, which Congressman Norman does have a track record of doing, then I think that next Tuesday it'll be anyone's race and we'll see how it turns out.
Now, David,
I will say this, either way, both candidates, I think, are going to support President Trump's agenda. It's just a matter of who can fight the best to get that done in the next 2 years in the Senate.
Will be interesting to watch. David, now who would Democrats prefer to see win this runoff?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I think that they have a difficult task in front of them now because they have to show a little bit of daylight between themselves and Donald Trump. Because I don't think it's enough to just say, hey, I'm the rubber stamp of the president. I'm the brother of the former senator. She's got to be able to do a little bit more than that without alienating those Trump voters. And look, most of the people in this primary that are participating are going to be supporting Donald Trump, but I think they want to make sure that they're supporting South Carolina first. And that's going to be that fine line that they have to walk. South Carolina is an open primary state, meaning that Democrats can participate in this primary if they want to. So that's another calculation that they have to take into consideration. So I think it's not going to be enough to say, hey, I'll support Donald Trump to the end. They've got to put a little bit of daylight in there, and how they do that, they've got to do it very, very gently.
All right. Jenny Beth, I do have to ask you, there was a New York Times article. The headline said, I'll read it to you, Democrats face a potential Tea Party moment, talking about the primaries here. What do you make of that?
Is that talking about the primaries broadly speaking for this entire election cycle? I think that's what that article was talking about. I think that there is some momentum happening on the Democrat side of the aisle, but what we're seeing on the Democrat side of the aisle right now is very different than what happened in 2010 when we had that Tea Party wave that happened after the Tea Party movement began. There are a couple reasons for it. The Tea Party movement was very good at articulating what we stood for, not just what we were upset about, and the things that we were standing for. At the time, we were very much talking about healthcare freedom, and we were talking about less government spending and more limited government. These were things that resonated with Americans and Americans wanted to see. What we're seeing on the Democratic socialist side right now are things that are out of touch with America, abolishing the Senate, abolishing the presidency, having the president appointed by Congress.
The philosophies are very, very different indeed. Absolutely. But it will be interesting to see again how, I'll say, this breakout group continues to do. Jenny Beth Martin, David Carlucci, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good to be with you.
All right, and now it's time for our Soundbite Shuffle. All right, sit back and let us scroll for you. Well, today a pollster reveals the state of the Democratic Party, while Kentucky's Democrat governor embraces the DSA. But first, the mayor of New York City is responding to some criticism.
You're right. I've got to do better. Safety first, New York. See you out there.
Donkey today for Tuesday, August 18th, goes to one of the most confusing people in American politics, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. Hakeem was on Meet the Press with Kristen Welker, and the House Minority Leader indicated that he does not currently support Medicare for all. But I have a question for Hakeem Jeffries in regards to Medicare for all. Simply, what changed?
Just to drill down a little bit more on the DSA, do you believe that this is a blip on the radar for the Democratic Party with these more progressive socialist candidates being elected, or do you think that this could be the future of the Democratic Party?
I think the Democratic Party has to be a big tent party where people can have different ideas on how we solve a problem.
I don't see DSA people being very successful in Florida. That's just not how we are here. And the people that are moving into Florida are moving from states like New York and California and Michigan, where Democrat policies push them out.
And in a little bit, we will have a report from Florida on the primaries, which includes DSA candidates. Well, a landmark trial could dramatically alter the future of social media as Mark Zuckerberg's Meta heads to court. That when the record continues. Stay right there.
You're a proud American in the land of the free. But how do you feel about things right now? Are you thriving or just surviving? What's lifting you up? What's dragging you down? What issues matter to you most? Your voice and your vote is your power. Use that power and share your story with us. The voice of the voter. Newsmax is listening. Visit newsmax.com/voice of the voter.
Every 8 minutes, a claim of sexual assault is filed against rideshare drivers.
But rideshare companies prohibit both drivers and riders from carrying firearms to protect themselves.
Imagine this banana was a less lethal device capable of incapacitating an attacker in a fraction of a second and allowing you to escape.
At Byrna, we don't sell bananas. Go to Byrna.com to find out how you can always be prepared to defend.
Several days ago, my plane crashed in the wild. Good job, buddy. I'll get you home.
And I just come, and all the land is dark.
I got you. Go on, boy.
Heart of the Beast. New trailer online now.
What if your GLP-1 for weight loss was as easy to take as a mint? Small, discreet, and easy. Think about that. No needles. This is compounded tirzepatide, a mint-flavored tablet designed to fit into your daily routine. You simply let it dissolve under your tongue. A simple daily tablet, as easy to take as a mint.
Save $50 with promo code SLIM at dropthepounds.com/slim. That's promo code SLIM at dropthepounds.com/slim.
Social media giant Meta is in federal court today as jury trial begins in California. Meta facing a landmark trial over youth social media addiction. 29 states suing the company over allegations that social media platforms were designed to addict kids and mislead the public about their safety. I believe Newsmax correspondent Heather Myers has more. If we do have Heather, there she is. Heather, take it away.
Yeah, Katrina, both sides, in fact, already wrapped up their opening statements so far in this trial. It's moving along rather quickly. In fact, prosecutors actually just called their first witness to take the stand. They're calling this person a star witness, a former Meta engineer who has now been testifying in multiple trials against Meta, saying that the company did not do enough to keep teens safe. Now, the judge has not allowed any cameras in the courtroom, but has allowed an audio feed with the live hearing taking place that I've been monitoring. So this case involves 29 states accusing Meta of deliberately designing Instagram and Facebook to keep kids and teens hooked and violating laws meant to protect children. So 4 states, California, Colorado, Kentucky, and New Jersey, they are taking their claims to trial. That's what this is all about. Prosecutors are putting to Meta's own research, they say, including studies that showed teens are repeatedly exposed to bullying, nudity, and self-harm content. The states say Meta knew those risks, but still wanted kids and teens to spend as much time as possible on the apps. Meta's attorney, though, in that opening statement saying 96% of users on these platforms are adults and that Meta is not intentionally targeting teens. The states, though, are seeking changes to Facebook and Instagram and potentially massive penalties. Even Meta itself has said those penalties could reach $1.4 trillion. A statement on Meta's website reads in part, despite the snippets of conversations or cherry-picked quotes that plaintiffs' counsel may use to paint an intentionally misleading picture of the company, we're proud of the progress we've made. We stand by our record of putting teen safety first, and we'll keep making improvements. Meta founder Mark Zuckerberg and the head of Instagram will likely take the stand, we're told. Now, while this trial is underway, a California assemblyman, meanwhile, is writing legislation, he says, to get all social media giants to stop targeting teens with algorithms.
Parents' fault, and it's definitely not kids' fault. That this is happening right now. This is squarely on the feet of big tech as a whole. They have designed these products for their addictive nature. We're basically putting slot machines and cocaine in front of 14-year-olds.
So Meta's attorney says, despite what you see in the headlines, he is asking the jury, he said this during his opening statement, to listen to all of the evidence before making any sort of decision. This trial, though, is expected to last several weeks. The jury in the case is an advisory jury, meaning that the judge is the one who will make any final decisions. Reporting live in San Diego, I'm Heather Myers. Katrina, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks so much, Heather. Appreciate it. And joining us now, political and legal analyst, excuse me, Mehek Cooke. Mehek, great to have you with us here. Your thoughts on all this? What does this mean for the future of social media?
Well, Katrina, depending on how the case goes, this could change the landscape of what social media does for the future and our children. And make no mistake, I think parents have to have responsibility when it comes to media. But this is the crux of what Meta and Facebook have been doing. There is state evidence, and it's damning, that Meta and Facebook knew that there were vulnerabilities with child use on their app. They understood that there was a compulsive nature in terms of using the app, and they continued to build this to target young children. And then there have been negative repercussions from using Facebook and Meta alike. So I think this is going to be very similar to back in the day when cigarettes, anybody could smoke them, and then there was an age limit and you had to show age verification. I think that the courts at the end of the day are going to look to push for age verification and other ways to try and protect our youth. And for Mark Zuckerberg to take the stand, I'd really like to know what he knew, when he knew it, and what his solution was to solve it. I mean, age verification is the easiest thing he could have done. He's built a platform for this, Katrina.
No, that's true. It is interesting, though, because I've had some other people point out, well, but most younger kids are actually not even on Facebook and Instagram. Facebook is kind of, they say for older people like me, but also Instagram, we're not talking about these young kids. So I think that's an interesting point, but I want to pick up on what you said, that this is reminiscent to you of the big tobacco lawsuits. What's interesting, though, is say these states or some of these states do win. Where does the money go?
Well, I think it's supposed to go to a lot of the claims and the defendants, but a lot of times courts could even say it's for advertising. Think of casinos even. There was a time when casinos were deemed to be illegal, and once they were legal, it was for gambling addiction. So the court really has a lot of broad authority in terms of the litigants and the individual suing to show damage, but also education. And that could be commercials, just like cigarettes, just like casinos, any of these vices out there. It'll be interesting because this is, we're looking at millions upon millions of dollars, and it's impacted a lot of kids. Katrina, you may be on Facebook, but I know a lot of kids that are using Instagram today, and it is no mistake that maybe the older generation may be on Facebook, but Instagram is heavily used by the younger generation. Otherwise, Zuckerberg and others would not have created a scrolling or addictive pattern. This is all by design, and their own internal research has showed this as well. I mean,
That's right.
And by the way, I correct the figure. It's $1.4 trillion.
I was going to say it's in the trillions, yes, with the T. And also, Mehek, you're right, because we've interviewed here on Newsmax a whistleblower who was part of the scientists who actually helped create the algorithm for Facebook and Instagram, and she has spoken out saying, yep, it was intentional. So we'll see how all of this plays out. Mehek Cooke, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, the United States and Canada holding last-minute talks to find common ground in a tariff deadlock. Negotiators for both countries efforting to reach a truce on tariffs before a 12:01 a.m. deadline tomorrow morning. That's a deadline set by President Trump. If no deal is reached, Trump has threatened to impose 50% tariffs on $20 billion worth of Canadian products ranging from hockey sticks to tongue depressors. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney telling reporters they were deep in negotiations.
We are involved in very delicate and intense negotiations. This is not the time to negotiate in public, so it's very simple. We are in the middle of a negotiation, and we are coming to that negotiation from a position of strength.
Carney said to have instructed Canadian officials to offer targeted concessions to keep the tariffs from taking place and to ease existing levies on Canadian goods. Now, President Trump and the Prime Minister speaking by phone Monday afternoon, with negotiations continuing throughout today, but no deal has been publicly announced at this time. And coming up, Trump's America sees an historic plunge in violent crimes nationwide. But in Karen Bass's Los Angeles, scenes like this, you're watching it there, have become the norm. Violent mobs of teens destroying family-owned businesses just for fun. That when the record continues.
O'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
The plumbing's on the fritz. I got no time to get my own plumbing checked.
Actually, it only takes about 15 minutes to screen for colon cancer with the Cologuard Plus test.
Just don't mix up the boxes.
False positive and negative results may occur.
If you find yourself stopping more and more to catch your breath, you could be experiencing what we call temporary oxygen insufficiency. Give yourself a boost with Boost Oxygen. A few deep breaths of Boost Oxygen is all you need to help combat the negative effects of what we call temporary oxygen insufficiency.
Now I live life on my terms. With Boost Oxygen, I am unstoppable.
Get all-natural 5-star respiratory support with Boost Oxygen at these fine retailers.
Hey, I'm Dr. Drew. Our cells oxidize, and Fatty 15 reduces that risk. C15 is the longevity nutrient. I take this nutrient. My family takes the nutrient. You should too. Fatty 15 has benefits that people actually see and feel.
Kevin Sorbo here, and I have an important message to share. The government needs more money, your money. If you owe the IRS back taxes, they can garnish your wages and levy your bank accounts. They can even seize your retirement or take your home. Don't let the IRS target you. Call the professionals at Tax Network USA. Their tax lawyers and enrolled agents are experts in powerful programs that may even help you eliminate your tax debt.
Call for a free consultation or visit tnusa.com.
Your mouthwash routine just got a whole lot smarter. Use Smart Mouth Activated Dry Mouth for immediate relief and 12-hour bad breath prevention guaranteed. If your mouthwash isn't activated, it's not Smart Mouth. Relieve your dry mouth and prevent bad breath. Get Activated Smart Mouth.
Today, kids are navigating an always-on world, consuming more information than ever before. Strengthening youth mental health starts with ensuring kids have strong digital and media literacy skills. Teaching students how to think critically about the content they see online helps them navigate digital spaces thoughtfully and intentionally. We need to teach media literacy in every school. Youth mental health is complex, but media literacy empowers educators and parents to keep kids safe.
can't find a ranch style with a view.
And a mom-in-law suite.
More realtor agents recommend Realtor.com. With their expert new search tool, just search it like you'd say it.
Room for mom.
And Reba. Make it real with Realtor.com.
While this banana may not save you from someone breaking into your home, Berna's banana helped one vet repel an intruder in his.
This huge guy, 6'5", 6'6", just barreled through my front door. I have my Berna and my Glock. I always go for the Berna first. I've seen enough death and destruction to last 2 lifetimes. Here is the perfect item I can have, feel totally safe, and know I'm not going to kill anybody.
At Berna, we don't sell bananas, we sell peace of mind.
My gutters were clogged, and I know that can be a big problem, so I called Leaf Filter.
Leaf Filter Pros will clean out, reinforce, and protect your gutters. Our surgical-grade stainless steel micro mesh keeps the debris out and water moving. Call or click today.
Welcome back. I'm Katrina Szish in for Greta Van Susteren. And as you've probably heard, another round of primaries are happening today as the midterm season is in full swing. Voters head to the polls tonight in Florida, Wyoming, and Alaska, with a special election in California to fill disgraced Congressman Eric Swalwell's seat. Florida, with an array of important primary races on the ballot. Congressman Byron Donalds vying for the GOP nomination for governor. We spoke to Kat Cammack earlier today, the Congresswoman, and she is all thumbs up for Byron Donalds, so we'll see if her prediction holds. While Democrats fight to win the Senate nomination against likely GOP nominee Ashley Moody. The DSA also facing its latest test, taking its socialist push to the Sunshine State. Socialist Oliver Larkin is looking to oust incumbent Congressman Jared Moskowitz. Newsmax senior correspondent John Huddy has the latest for us from Florida. John, what can you tell us?
Florida remains a Republican powerhouse, a red state. So the brand of socialism that may have worked for candidates in New York, Michigan, and Minnesota may not exactly work among moderate Democrats here in the state. That said, we're outside a voting location in Orlando. Later, we'll be at Congressman Byron Donalds' campaign event. Donalds really leads the pack in the governor's race to take over for Governor DeSantis, whose term comes to an end. He's facing other Republican challengers, but at this point, Donalds, who's very popular in the state, has raised more than $100 million and is expected to really be the favorite come November. On the Democratic side, David Jolly will more than likely get his party's nod. But again, this is Donald's race to lose here for the governor's race in Florida. We're also watching the U.S. Senate race. Former Florida AG Ashley Moody trying to keep her seat that she was appointed to by Governor DeSantis to fill out and basically carry out Marco Rubio's term after he became Secretary of State. On the Democratic side, socialist candidate State Representative Angie Nixon of Jacksonville, also among the Dems, and retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Alex Vindman. There's also the newly configured 20th congressional district race in Broward County, where incumbent Democrat Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who had represented the 25th district, is trying to keep her seat in a region that has long elected black Democratic candidates. She's facing a 27-year-old socialist Elijah Manley also in that race. And in the newly redrawn 25th congressional district along Florida's southeast coast, incumbent Representative Jared Moskowitz, a moderate Democrat, staunch supporter of Israel, trying to retain his seat, facing socialist candidate Oliver Larkin. Polls close at 7 p.m. In Orlando, John Huddy, Newsmax.
All right, John Huddy, we appreciate it. Well, something that is top of mind for many voters for this midterm election season is crime. The U.S. seeing a surge in teen takeovers as mobs of minors take over streets and communities. In Los Angeles, well, they're the latest target. What started as a street takeover with more than 100 vehicles blocking the streets quickly escalated to something much worse. Dozens of teenagers breaking into a family-owned liquor store in L.A. County, ransacking and looting the store, according to Los Angeles County deputies. The thieves using power tools to cut through the locks before storming the store. Deputies estimate upwards of $30,000 worth of damage. So far, there are no arrests. Let's welcome in Patrick Brosnan, retired NYPD detective and spokesperson for the National Police Association, Betsy Brantner Smith. Great to see both of you. Pat, I'm going to start with you here. You and I have spoken about these teen takeovers before, and it just seems like they're getting much worse. But when you hear that no arrests have been made yet, I'm hoping that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be any. Talk about the importance of consequences for bad actions.
Well, nothing more important. I mean, consequences for bad actions is the parent of general and specific deterrence. But the reality is, you hear these teen takeovers, nice fancy name, but these are just felony riots for fun and profit. And they're very, very difficult for even relatively large police departments to manage and mitigate because of the speed and the secrecy engendered by the social media interconnectivity that sends hundreds and maybe even 1,000 of these perps out into the street to really engage in low-level felonies and, high-level misdemeanors, to be very honest. And this is riots, fun and profit, pure and simple.
Betsy, the business that we're talking about, that family business, they have security cameras. They even have an alarm system. But still, we saw exactly what happened. I mean, at this point, is there anything business owners can do to protect themselves? Because it seems to me you got a bunch of teens showing up with power tools. Clearly, they knew they were up to no good.
Well, and this is a problem, and Pat is right. This isn't some sort of little teen activity. This is a burglary, and it needs to be treated as such. And when you look at how are we going to deal with these and prevent these, that store has clearly done they have cameras, they have bars, they have alarms, everything. What you need is consequences for these actions. And that's what we need to see. Remember, it's a small percentage of young people that are committing these crimes. They need to go to jail.
Betsy, do you think we'll see arrests from this?
I hope that we will. I think we'll be able to identify some of those young teens. Plus, teens love to talk about this and talk about what they did. I think you'll see some. It's not the arrests that are the issues. It's the prosecution and the punishment.
That's a good point.
Cops can arrest everybody. They've
they
got
can
to be
also let them go. Yeah, good point. Patrick, obviously we know that since President Trump has returned to office, we've seen those numbers, violent crime rates plummeting around the country. That was new data from the FBI, and they reveal just dramatically how that has changed. In 2025, the violent crime plunged 9.7%. That's the largest annual drop since the FBI's national estimates even started, and that was back in 1936. So to what do you attribute this dramatic change? Obviously, we're seeing places where they haven't been as lucky, but how maybe can we extend this positivity and what has to happen?
Well, first of all, success has many parents, as we know. And in this case, a lot of the parents are technology driven. And we had the introduction of drones for first responders, which is a very efficient and effective tool for law enforcement. Smart cameras have now come down in price, analytic cameras. But more importantly, with companies like Flock and others, they've been able to integrate the smart camera technology with very smart license plate readers. And that's a game changer in terms of like kind of a national dragnet in terms of identifying stolen vehicles that involved in robberies and push-in robberies and carjackings and so forth. So I would say that technology gets the nod on this one. And let's not forget that the numbers were skewed a bit coming out of COVID and post-Floyd riots and defund the police. So not certain if the numbers post-2020 of March are as accurate as, say, 2019 and beforehand.
Sure.
But I'll still give a bow to it.
But still good news. Hey, still very good news.
Yes,
We
it
hope
is.
it
Absolutely.
continues. All right, Pat Brosnan, Betsy Brantner Smith, always great to see you both. Thank you. And now moving on to this, some tragic news out of Indiana as the state deals with deadly and historic flooding. 7 people left dead after receiving more than 11 inches of rain in just 2 days. Thousands of people have been forced from their homes and hundreds of thousands across the state are left without power. Meteorologist Amy Metz brings us the latest from Carmel, Indiana. Amy, what can you tell us?
Well, Katrina, right here, just since we've been standing at this location along White River, a creek running off of it, we've seen more landslides. Just across the water here was a grove of trees, but as this extremely historic flooding was occurring, this water ended up backflowing. Typically, this will be running the other way as a small trickling creek. Instead, what happened was White River, very close by, ended up overflowing so much that it pushed debris into this bridge, completely collapsing it. We're now hearing this could take up to 2 years to repair. You can see extensive damage from landslides and debris is in the area. Right now, crews are working upstream, which again is normally downstream, and they are trying to build a dam. As more rain is forecast tomorrow, they want to get ahead of that. Now, as people are cleaning up, around all of the neighborhoods. This spans about 200 miles across Illinois and Indiana. We are learning that after many of those rescue crews went through and saved people's lives, that there are at least 1,000 people that have been displaced, so shelters have been opened up for them. We'll hear from a couple of these people.
Got this just a few months ago, and now it's not livable, at least right now.
I've been trying to keep a positive mindset. I've been trying to just not think about it too much, because I know as much as I want things to be all right, it's obviously not.
Now, Katrina, as things are moving forward, water's receding. Unfortunately, we're waiting for another round of rain tomorrow, so just hoping it's not as bad.
Amy Metz, we appreciate the update. Thank you so much. And coming up, back to the site of tonight's debate, hosted by Newsmax. What to know about South Carolina and the two candidates facing off in just a couple of hours. That when the record continues. Stay right there.
Newsmax
shoots it straight. No talking down to me.
Don't tell me how to think.
Don't tell me how to think. Don't tell me how to think.
I trust Newsmax. Newsmax.
They don't tell me how to think. They let me decide.
Real news for real people.
Clients who rolled over their IRAs 2 or 3 years ago have doubled and tripled their retirement accounts. Billionaire Eric Sprott disclosed he has invested 98% of his $3 billion fortune into gold and silver, and said gold's going to $10,000 an ounce. Vanguard and Goldman warned of a lost decade ahead for stocks. Gold's role isn't to make you rich, it's to help you survive what's coming. Aren't these supposed to be your golden years? Call Patriot Gold Group at 1-800-778-4156. Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold and silver dealer nationwide, home of the America 250 no-fee for life IRA. Call now and see how easy it is to protect your IRA with physical gold and silver. Call now, 1-800-778-4156.
Every day across the globe, big business agendas go unseen by investors. Things that go against your core values and beliefs. It's time to know your investments. Abortion, alternative lifestyles, gender and identity confusion. If you believe in protecting marriage and life, children, innocence, guarding masculinity, restoring families, defending religious liberty, invest with your values. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
It's 2 a.m. Your fever spiked and you're miserable. Here's your options.
Urgent care, closed. ER, slammed. And you'll spend hundreds of thousands in both. Telehealth, yeah, but the pharmacies are closed.
That's the reason why we keep emergency medical kits at home.
It has doctor-prescribed medication like generic Z-Pak, amoxicillin, other antibiotics and antivirals. You can treat flu, pneumonia, strep, sinus infections, UTIs, and more.
Because if you're sick in at night, traveling or stranded, you don't want options.
You want what is inside this kit. No waiting, no pharmacy, and no copays.
Just schedule a quick telehealth call.
And that's how you feel better faster and avoid serious complications.
Every family should have this kit, and here's how to order yours.
Order online in minutes and use the promo code to save $45. Your doctor-prescribed kit ships fast to your door, packed with medications to treat over 30 conditions. So when something hits, you're ready. And a wellness company telehealth doctor is always there if you need guidance.
When Saturday rolls around, I don't want to jump through hoops to watch college football. Good thing DirecTV makes it easy to keep up with my favorite college teams. No hopping between apps or channels.
Stream college football without the hurdles on DirecTV.
We're less than 3 hours away from tonight's South Carolina Republican Senate runoff debate. It starts at 7 p.m. right here on Newsmax, and our very own Greta Van Susteren will be moderating that debate. Senator Darlene Graham will face off against Congressman Ralph Norman. Congressional correspondent Kilmeny Duchardt is live there in Newberry, South Carolina. Kilm, how's it going?
Katrina, good to be with you. The countdown is on here in Newberry. Of course, we're having some rehearsals right behind us right now, but the stage has been set. This is a very small town, 11,000 residents here in Newberry, but this is, of course, going to be at the center of the political spotlight for the Senate runoff that we have between Darlene Graham and Ralph Norman. Now, this was a very tight primary and a very crowded GOP field to replace the late Senator Lindsey Graham's seat. Graham emerged first with 33% of that vote, and then Norman was right behind her with 24%. So neither candidate had gotten that majority. That's why we're here tonight. Graham is running on her decades of public service, including leading the South Carolina Commission for the Blind. But some South Carolina voters right now are questioning her motives for seeking her brother's Senate seat. They want to know more about her and whether her campaign is about power or people, despite the endorsements that she's received from President Trump and a lot of establishment figures. It's a question that she tries to answer in her own ad here.
Lindsay taught me public service isn't about titles. It's about helping people. President Trump asked me to run for the Senate to work with him on the issues we care about.
Now, Norman, on the other hand, has spent years running for office, including campaigns and debates. So he's obviously somebody that can hold his own on the debate stage. He's served in the House since 2017, and he's making his experience in elected office a central part of his case.
South Carolina needs a proven conservative with a record of fighting for you. You shouldn't have to guess where your next senator stands. With me, you already know.
Now, Katrina, these are two conservatives who support the president's agenda, but tonight is closing arguments right now. This could be a make or break moment for both of these candidates, with early voting set to take place tomorrow in South Carolina. Back to you.
All right, Kilm, thanks. And as you said, the countdown is on. All right. And meanwhile, the Trump administration is expanding its lethal campaign against narco traffickers. A new plan involves working with partner countries to combat the traffickers' influence in the Western Hemisphere. How? By potentially putting U.S. boots on the ground. Foreign Affairs correspondent Alex Salvi has the details on this. Alex.
It marks a new phase in the Trump administration's campaign to pressure governments in Latin America to better align with the United States in the Western Hemisphere. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth announcing during a visit to Panama last week that several countries will be allowing the U.S. military to carry out joint operations against cartels on their own soil. The United States has operated in Latin America for generations, often supplying allies with weapons and intelligence to fight drug traffickers. But Hegseth says the Trump administration is prepared to go even a step further.
Anywhere you traffic drugs, or you threaten the American people or our partners, you are a target just like ISIS or Al-Qaeda. This is a networked fight that we're empowering Southcom and Northcom together in the Western Hemisphere to execute ruthlessly.
Much like the fight against Al-Qaeda and ISIS, Hegseth says that this will be a coalition effort, with the United States working alongside allies in the Western Hemisphere to pursue shared goals of combating narco traffickers. The U.S. military last week wrapping up joint drills in Panama that were designed to coordinate these efforts, practicing everything from drug busts at sea to identifying and detaining human traffickers. Several countries, Colombia, Guatemala, Ecuador, and Honduras, just to name a few, have reached deals with the U.S. that would allow it to operate on their soil. Hegseth says it expands a practice that's already underway, in which the U.S. has killed hundreds of narco-terrorists on drug boats off the coast of South America by now expanding that operation onto land. A wave of conservative victories across the region is giving the Trump administration like-minded allies in this effort, as it now undertakes the largest action against drug cartels in several decades. In Washington, Alex Salvi, Newsmax.
Alex Salvi, thank you so much for that. And coming up, a fake poll shakes up the Los Angeles mayor's race and raises questions about political misinformation. That when the record continues. Stay there.
Almost half of women runners say safety is their biggest concern. Majority of us have to constantly change routes, start times.
Instead of thinking of my pace, we worry about being followed, unwanted attention, and stuff that is simply scary.
Imagine this banana was a less lethal device, capable of incapacitating an attacker, letting you get to safety. At Byrna, we don't sell bananas. Go to Byrna.com to find how you can always safely make it to the finish line.
LeafGuard has earned the Good Housekeeping seal for over 20 years and has been lab tested to handle up to 32 inches of rainfall an hour. Don't deal with those old gutters any longer. Get LeafGuard, the only seamless one-piece rainwater management system with a clog-free guarantee and lifetime transferable warranty. It's LeafGuard's Celebrate America sale. 75% off installation of a complete LeafGuard system. You'll receive a bonus, a $250 Visa gift card with your LeafGuard purchase. Act now and get no interest and no payments until 2028. Remember, with LeafGuard, the top's not a cover, it's part of the gutter. Call now to have a nice gift for you. A free $100 Visa gift card with your free in-home estimate. Call 800-541-1274. Now, let me give you that number again. 1-800-541-1274.
The LeafGuard system has blown away our initial expectations.
I love the fact my LeafGuard gutters are low maintenance.
I'm a happy LeafGuard customer.
Who wants to be on a ladder this summer cleaning clogged gutters? I mean, let's face it, they can be a fire hazard in drier conditions. All it takes is one spark. That's why homeowners choose LeafGuard, the gutter that never clogs, guaranteed. It's our Celebrate America sale, 75% off installation of a complete LeafGuard system. You'll receive a bonus, a $250 Visa gift card with purchase. Act now and get no interest and no payments until 2028. This can come in handy when you fill up at the pump, a free $100 Visa gift card with your free in-home estimate. Call 800-541-1274. Now, let me give you that number again. 1-800-541-1274.
What if your GLP-1 for weight loss was as easy to take as a mint? Small, discreet, and easy. Think about that. No needles. This is compounded tirzepatide, a mint-flavored tablet designed to fit into your daily routine. You simply let it dissolve under your tongue. A simple daily tablet, as easy to take as a mint.
Save $50 with promo code SLIM at dropthepounds.com/slim. That's promo code SLIM at dropthepounds.com/slim.
A fake poll is making waves in the Los Angeles mayor's race. The poll in question, well, it shows Mayor Karen Bass with a nearly 12-point lead over her opponent, Nithya Raman. But the company behind the poll says the results are fabricated. What's even more concerning is the fact that LA Mayor Bass, she shared the poll on social media before the firm announced that it was an experiment. The polling company says it wanted to examine, quote, how purported polling information could enter and spread through the political information ecosystem without independent verification. That sounds pretty reckless to me. Reagan White House political analyst Craig Keshishian joins me now. Craig, great to see you again. This sounds like a very dangerous experiment, and I'm kind of putting that in heavy air quotes. It just sounds like a company trying to see if they actually could affect an election with a fake poll. Am I looking at it correctly?
Wow, Katrina, thank you for having me back. This was, to me, earth-rattling, very upsetting on many levels. Firstly, it can influence fundraising, dynamics of voting turnout, and morale, and thirdly, it's just disinformation that is harmful in the bigger political debate, and it sets a dangerous precedent. Like, for example, tonight, what happens if a fake poll comes out saying Ralph Norman has surged to the lead? Darlene Graham's fundraising dries up, or vice versa. Darlene Graham's running away with it. Ralph Norman's fundraising and manpower dries up or comes to a screeching halt. So this to me is very frightening. And shockingly, I think it falls under the rubric of political free speech. I don't think it could be punished. That's what's so sickening about
really
this.
It also seems, though, that it would put the onus on campaigns and media organizations to really verify the source of any polls that they're using or quoting or sharing. Is that something that maybe this would inspire campaigns to do?
I hope it does. That's a wonderful solution, a very pragmatic one. And the other is one I shared with Greta last week, which is just look at the conglomeration of polls and take the average. But in these smaller races, you're not going to see several polls being published for a congressional seat or a mayor's seat. So it really puts clear, precise thinking in jeopardy as one selects a candidate. And that harms American democracy, both on the left and on the right. And that's not a good thing. It's
Craig,
propaganda.
It is propaganda, and and the company said, well, this was an experiment. That's how they described it. Do you think it's something more nefarious than that? Do you think they're testing the waters for something else they or another nefarious group might attempt?
I think you are into something. I think this is bogus. I think that company may not even exist. I never heard of them.
They shut down their operations when they said their experiment was done.
Well, they also published a poll on the Wisconsin governor's primary on the Democratic side and had Hahn leading massively. And we know what the result was in that particular contest. So this is a dangerous precedent. And if others follow in this suit, it could open up a whole new salvo of political bad behavior and dirty tricks, which is not a healthy sign. And it doesn't bode well.
Now, Craig,
I just hope we can correct it.
Absolutely. But what should Americans take away from this? Because as you pointed out, a lot of the polls we've seen, even in the primaries, while they were not fake, they were certainly way off target. But then also you hear about the fake polls. A lot of Americans have a lot of distrust in many things, whether it's elections or our political system overall. Your advice to them before we wrap?
Take a deep breath and be very careful. Be very careful what you read. It's just like the internet. Just don't believe everything you see.
Yeah, trust your source, verify your sources, and again, really, really reflect on what you choose to believe. And again, if it's real information. Craig Keshishian, always great to see you. Thanks.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
You too. Well, a mother and her 17-year-old daughter say they were forced to cover their XXXY athletic shirts at a WNBA game on Sunday in Atlanta. The shirts are often used to advocate for protecting women's sports from transgender athletes. The mother and daughter duo say security told them that their shirts were offensive and that they needed to cover up. If not, they'd be removed from the arena. The pair spoke to Newsmax earlier today. Here's what they said.
We had seen a couple of people pointing us out to staff or security about being offended. And I was like, people are offended by science? Like, these are chromosomes. How can you be offended by that? I honestly can't believe that we live in a world that men and women's sports is so controversial that the 10% that doesn't like it is really loud against us.
Yeah.
Well, the WNBA has since apologized for the incident, admitting it should not have happened. All right, and coming up, what happened at the Iowa State Fair? Ooh, that when the record continues. Stay there.
Information. Truth. Is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.
If you're about to replace your roof, stop. There's a solution about 80% less expensive. 9 out of 10 roofs can be saved by Roofmax. Guaranteed to extend the life of your current roof by 5 to 15 years at a fraction of the cost of a new roof. Roofmax's deep penetrating power restores flexibility and water protection. Nobody wants to replace their roof. Restore it instead with Roofmax for 80% less.
Did you hear about SHIELD, that test for colon cancer?
No, what?
It's just a blood test.
No.
Exactly.
SHIELD is for people 45 plus at average risk, not high risk for colon cancer. Ask your doctor about FDA-approved SHIELD.
There's a reason the wealthy don't keep all their money in one place. We work hard our entire lives to build wealth for retirement. If your retirement dropped 30% tomorrow, would you be ready? Or would you just have to wait and hope it comes back? The last thing any of us wants is to watch our retirement accounts shrink every time Wall Street panics, the dollar drops, or global uncertainty rises. That's why so many successful Americans turn to gold to help protect their retirement. And Preserve Gold is the only precious metals company I trust and recommend. Let me be frank, gold is not for everybody. And I do not give financial advice, but I do urge you to get my free wealth protection guide from Preserve Gold and learn about a special offer to receive up to $20,000 in free gold and silver. Education is power.
Text Newsmax to 50505.
Some wireless companies say that they stand for something. What exactly do they stand for, and why won't they say it out loud? Let me tell you what Patriot Mobile stands for. They stand for the lives of the unborn. They stand for the Second Amendment and the right to protect yourself and your family. They stand for our veterans and first responders who sacrifice so much for our freedom. Make the switch to Patriot Mobile today and support a company that doesn't just say they stand for something, but one that stands for the things that matter the most.
It's me, Ricky. You grew up with me. I am using Fatty 15 to get me to feel and look the best I've ever felt at my age. The C15 nutrient has been known to strengthen our cells and slow the aging process at a cellular level. I urge you to try Fatty 15.
America, a people bound by faith, freedom, and opportunity. Its prosperity owed to a long line of warriors and an ethos that remains unwavering. Our warfighters stand on the shoulders of giants who have taught us to fight and win. America's War Department continues to build the most lethal fighting force on the planet. Because peace demands strength. Now is the time to earn a place in the fight for the American cause. And the shoulders the next generation stand on will be yours.
The Iowa State Fair had a very interesting event that you're going to need to see to believe. Watch. Wow, that is a chicken calling contest. I wonder if any chicken came at the Iowa State Fair. Now, the contest was part of the Rural Americana Old Time Competitions, and the winner received a prize of $5. Ribbons were also handed out. Meanwhile, researchers in Australia made a shocking discovery about dolphins. They found that when dolphins hunt for fish, they don't only use their mouths. It turns out they have learned how to use tools. Researchers from the University of the Sunshine Coast in Australia, they caught this video. Now, you're looking at a bottlenose dolphin using a shell to hunt fish. Researchers say they watched the dolphin bring the shell above the water, and then the dolphin drained the water out of the shell and ate the fish using the shell the whole time. No wonder they're considered some of the most smart mammals. All right, thanks so much for watching. I'm Katrina Szish. Ed Henry, The Big Take is...
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.